Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination.
He was a combination of innocence and danger.
Champagne?
You didn't know what Gene Wilder was going to do.
He was an actor who had an ability to be funny.
Hello.
He's naive, he's innocent.
Whoops.
He's sweet, simple, and honest. But when he got excited, he was a volcano.
He had a unique ability to find humor
I never thought it could be like this.
in anything.
You'll never find another Gene Wilder.
I didn't think Jerry Silberman had the right ring to it. I wanted to be Wilder. Suppose you're walking out of the Plaza Hotel in New York City on a warm spring day. You want to go directly across the street to Fifth Avenue, but the Plaza Fountain is directly in your path. You can get to Fifth Avenue by walking around the fountain on the path to your left, or by taking the path to your right. I believe that whichever choice you make could change your life. I'm sure everyone has had these mysterious brushes with irony, perhaps referring to them years later as almost fate. January 1963. Jerome Robbins was going to direct Bertolt Brecht's play Mother Courage on Broadway, with Anne Bancroft as the star. Fate must be working its magic, because if he hadn't miscast me in Mother Courage, I wouldn't have met Anne Bancroft. If I hadn't met Anne Bancroft, I wouldn't have met Mel Brooks. If I hadn't met Mel Brooks, I would probably be a patient in some neuropsychiatric hospital, looking through the bars of a physical therapy window as I made wallets. We opened previews at the Martin Beck Theater to a packed house. Anne Bancroft's boyfriend came to pick her up each night after the show. The boyfriend's name was Mel Brooks.
We were heavily engaged and heavily in love. She kept telling me about this weird, strange, very talented guy in the cast who had innocence, blessed with innocence, and she knew that I was writing a rough draft of, then it was called Springtime for Hitler. Later, I changed it to The Producers. And she knew that I had this character, Leo Bloom, and she said, I think he's Leo Bloom on the hoof. He's right there. He's naive. He's innocent. So I saw the show, and I kept watching it every night, and I agreed with her, and I said, that's my Leo Bloom. I want to meet him. I met him backstage at the Martin Beck Theater.
When I met Mel for the first time, he was wearing a black pea jacket of the kind made famous by the Merchant Marines.
So he said, that's a pea coat. And and the Borscht Belt comic in me said, no, that's too vulgar. I call it a urine coat. And he really grabbed his belly and really laughed. I immediately fell in love with him. You get a terrific, real laugh out of somebody, and Gene was a great laugher.
Despite Anne's Academy Award that year for The Miracle Worker, Mother Courage closed after 3 months. Mel asked if I would like to spend a weekend with him and Anne on Fire Island.
And I invited him out to our house on the beach for a weekend.
After dinner, Mel asked Anne and me to sit down, and then he began reading the first 3 scenes of Springtime for Hitler, almost verbatim as they eventually appeared on screen.
Gee, He can make more money with a flop than he can with a hit.
You keep saying
What
that,
do you
but
mean?
you don't tell me
How? How can you
How
make
can a
more
producer
money
make
with
more
a flop
money with a
than
flop
a hit?
than he could with a hit?
I read 37 pages, that's all I had, introducing Leo Bloom fully.
But you still look angry.
How's this?
Good. That's good. That's very nice.
I thought I saw a little tear run down. He said, "And you want me to play that?" I said, "Yes. I want you to play that simple, beautiful, innocent, good-natured account."
I loved it. I said yes. I wondered, how can a few words change your life?
You originally were Jerry Silberman.
Yes, and I think there's somewhere inside he's still there, lurking around.
I used to be Jerry Silberman from Milwaukee. When I was 8 years old, my mother had her first heart attack. After my father brought her home from the hospital, her heart specialist came to see how she was doing. He grabbed my right arm and whispered in my ear, "Don't ever argue with your mother. You might kill her. Try to make her laugh." If he hadn't said those 2 sentences, I might have gone into used car salesman or something like that, or a concert violinist, or perhaps a painter.
Well, Aunt Jean was always ill, and Jerry just adored her. He did try to be funny. He tried to amuse her. He tried to do things to make her laugh.
I had thought often about being a comedian, mostly because I had seen Danny Kaye in Up in Arms.
Danny Kaye was, I think, very special to him.
And then Jerry Lewis on television. And then, for me, the king of them all, Sid Caesar on your show of shows. I did Jewish accents and German accents, and I did make my mother laugh. Every once in a while, if I was a little too successful, she'd run into the bathroom squealing, "Oh, Jerry, now look what you've made me do."
She had a wonderful sense of humor. I think Jean probably got some of it from her.
And then when I started acting, she always thought that I was good, and that gave me the confidence to go on.
Sorry, sir.
I think he loved the stage best of all. He just belonged there.
I was asked to take over Alan Arkin's role in Love on Broadway. It had now been 3 years since I heard from Mel Brooks. I'd given up hopes of being Leo Bloom in Springtime for Hitler. I was taking off my makeup one day when someone knocked on my dressing room door. I opened the door, and there was Mel. Mel said, "You don't think I forgot, do you?" Then he introduced me to the tall gentleman with him, Sidney Glazer, who was going to produce Springtime for Hitler.
I met Sidney Glazer. I gave him my script. He said, "I don't want to read it. Read it to me." And I began reading, and he was eating a big tuna fish sandwich and a huge cup of coffee. And he'd sip the coffee and he'd eat and he'd listen. And every once in a while he'd smile. Once in a while he'd laugh a little bit. And when I got to the blue blanket scene,
My blanket, my blue blanket, give me my blue blanket.
he spit the coffee all over the office. And he said, "We got to make this movie."
Mel started talking as if we were just continuing a conversation from yesterday. "Now listen, you know I love you, but Zero Mostel's going to play Bialystok, and I can't just spring you on him because he's got approval of anyone who plays Leo. So you got to do a reading with him, just so he can see for himself how good you are." The morning of the reading, I was very nervous. If I don't get this part, I'll just be a good featured, maybe supporting actor for the rest of my life. Mel opened the door and gave me a hug. I could see Zero Mostel in the background. And then Mel pulled me into the office. This huge, round fantasy of a man came waltzing towards me. My heart was pounding so loud I thought he'd hear it.
Zero grabbed Gene, bent him over, and kissed him on the lips fully, and then turned to me and said, "This is my bloom."
All nervousness floated away. I think Zero did it for that reason. I gave a good reading and was cast in Springtime for Hitler. Filming on Springtime for Hitler was to begin in May, but in the meantime, I was offered a small part in a movie called Bonnie and Clyde, starring Warren Beatty and directed by Arthur Penn. The company was already filming in Texas. I arrived in Dallas and I went to the set. Arthur Penn introduced me to the pretty young woman who would be playing my fiancée. Her name was Evans Evans. We said hello and shook hands. The camera started rolling. The first scene started with Evans and me kissing on her porch. A little strange to start kissing someone you just met 2 minutes earlier, but it was fun.
Say, isn't that your car, Eugene?
That's my car.
Arthur said, "Cut." Very good. And that was my introduction to movie acting. Later, I'm riding in the back of a car with the Barrow Gang.
Maybe y'all want to join up with us.
Oh, boy. They sure would be surprised to hear that back home.
Hey, what do you do anyhow?
I'm an undertaker.
Get them out of here.
When filming was over, Arthur Penn told me that he had never envisioned the part being played the way I did it. He never imagined it being funny. Zero Mostel had a car and driver assigned to him when filming for Springtime for Hitler began. He would pick me up each morning and that we could travel to work together.
It was a marriage made in heaven. They were just made for each other.
I'm an honest man. You don't understand.
No, Bloom, you don't understand. This is fate. This is destiny. This is kismet. There's no avoiding it.
It was the first movie I ever directed. It was like getting into a big canoe and gliding down the river. That's how easy they made it for me.
I'm happy.
And they did, and sometimes they had lived stuff that was a lot better than stuff I had written. But I was in heaven.
Joe Levine, the man who put up half the budget and was going to distribute the film, went to a screening room with Mel and saw the first 11 minutes of the dailies.
Joe Levine saw the dailies on the third day with Bialystok and Bloom, the one in the hallway where he's frightened and where he's just superb.
Speak, dummy, speak. Why don't you speak?
I'm scared. Can't talk.
He said he's cute, he has curly hair, but I need a leading man. He's in a bit of a wimp. I'll give you another 10,000. Get somebody who looks like a leading man. I said, I don't want a leading man. I want the opposite of a leading man. I want somebody who's afraid of the world, who retreats instead of attacks like Bialystok. He said, get another guy to play Leo Bloom. I said, and this is the first time I said it, and in every single movie, I said to the head of the studio, yeah, you're right, you got it. And never, ever did what they wanted me to do. I started with Joe Levine. Gene Wilder is out. You see, next week, I'll have somebody else. He left the screening room happy.
We were about to rehearse my big hysterical scene. I was anxious to see how Zero and I would play it together. Mel never said action like every other director. Mel said, go.
Oh,
and I gave it my all.
You miserable, cowardly, wretched little caterpillar.
You would normally be a little afraid of Bialystok, who was a force. He was a living force. He was just a ton of flesh, a crescendo of humanity.
Glory! You're gonna jump on me. Huh? You're gonna jump on me. I know you're gonna jump on me.
This giant hulk of a man is now making all these strange gestures and might possibly pounce on me.
Please don't jump on me. I'm not gonna jump! I'm not gonna! Will you get a hold of yourself? Don't touch me! Don't touch me!
He could scare you. And he scared Gene, and Gene was timid.
I think what connects Leo Bloom to me and to the audience is fear.
I'm hysterical!
Just the fear that he goes through life carrying. What comes across is this intense humanity, right? This authenticity that Gene brings out of Leo Bloom.
When the scene was over, the whole crew laughed and applauded. I was worn out and a little hoarse, but the scene went very well.
Joe Levine, who said I had to take out Gene, we kept him away from the Daily, so he never knew that Gene would come in every day and work. And finally, I said, he's done half the picture. It costs us too much money to replace him.
We were at the Lincoln Center fountain on the last day of filming, waiting for the sun to go down.
I said to the guy running the fountain at Lincoln Center, I said, it goes up to 12 or 15 feet. Can you get it up to 20? He says, I can get it up to 50. I said, go for broke.
When the sun finally went down, the cameras started rolling.
I'll do it!
And the fountain was turned on, in the film and in my life.
And we finished the movie right on that night. It was a miraculous moment.
I was sad that the film was ending, of course, but also very happy. And I knew that I'd been part of a unique film, working with the two most unusual people I had ever met. The outrageousness, the complete audacity of Zero and Mel remains with me.
The movie that really launched you, as it were. That was a character that held in the anger too, and then suddenly would burst out into manic explosion. Was that you?
Yes, that was me. It was a part of me.
When my mother was suffering, the doctor set off something terrible in me because don't ever argue with your mother inhibited me from getting angry with anyone and holding it all in, and that's poison.
No child should ever be told, don't argue with your mother, you might kill her. That is an unbelievably heavy burden to carry.
I felt a rage that I didn't or couldn't express, except through acting.
He started acting in high school plays. And then Gene was with the Milwaukee Players. He was always the lead. We'd go to rehearsals together. And he just came and got me, so take me with him.
Being on stage was a thing that saved me from myself. When I was in a play, I was safe. I was drafted into the Army on September 10th, 1956. At the end of basic training, I was assigned to the Medical Corps at the Neuropsychiatric Hospital in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania.
Patients are all going through psychotic phases. I saw their behavior. I thought that would be the closest to acting that would help me later on. I wasn't wrong.
And they're certainly not showing any signs that they are slowing.
It's really tough for me to pick my favorite Gene Wilder film because so many of them were so great. But I have to say that Willy Wonka is my favorite because what Gene was able to do on camera. That was so attractive. That was so charismatic and becoming.
I'm so glad you could come. This is going to be such an exciting day. I hope you enjoy it. I think you will. And now, would you please show me your golden tickets?
Charlie Bucket.
Well, Charlie Bucket. I read all about you in the papers. I'm so happy for you.
I was in 4th grade in Shaker Heights, Ohio, and the Cleveland Playhouse has a very active children's theater. It's got a nice resume. Joel Grey came from the Cleveland Playhouse. Margaret Hamilton, Wicked Witch of the West. It was a good place to learn, good place to start for me. When they were casting Willy Wonka, that was one of the theaters that they called, so my name was given to them. They had me do a screen test. I was nobody. I didn't have a large resume. This was just like a lark. It was fun. If I didn't get the part, there weren't any hard feelings, you know. Months later, Mel Stewart, the director, finally called and talked to my mother and said, hey, you got the role. I'm going to be Charlie, and you need to be in Munich in like 10 days.
Casting was very important in that, but above all, the casting of Wonka. One day I remember we were at the Plaza Hotel in New York. We were casting there. Gene Wilder walks in, and I looked at him, and I said, here's just a line. Would you read just a line for us from the book? And he reads it. And he says, okay. I said, okay. And he starts to walk out, and I went to the producer, Dave Wahlberg. I said, no matter what happens, he is Willy Wonka.
I wasn't sure if I wanted to play Willy Wonka. The script was good, but there was something that was bothering me. Mel Stewart asked me, what's bothering you? It was my entrance walk.
I think in the script it was written as this big, energetic entrance. But he wanted to come out sort of hobbling with a cane, kind of hunched over.
Then Willy Wonka's cane gets stuck in a brick.
When Gene came out and he's hobbling, and that's not what you expect, and then he falls and does his somersault, that caught everybody off guard.
That was Gene's idea, and I just thought it was so brilliant because it was really important. From the very first time that you met him, you never know, is this guy, you know, for real, or is he full of baloney?
Right from the get-go, that was how he was setting himself up for us and for the audience. You could tell that this was going to be somebody who was going to be fun to work with. Right away, I think we hit it off. Gene was a father figure and my mentor. Was one of those people, like when you have a really good teacher, you don't want to let them down. He wasn't treating me like a kid. I was being treated like his co-star.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the chocolate room.
Our first introduction to the chocolate room was, in fact, the first time that we had ever seen it. And Mel wanted our initial reaction, that wow factor. And it was a big room, big set.
Hold your breath. Make a wish. Count to 3.
Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination.
Everything is not what you think when you watch Willy Wonka, and particularly with Gene. He was always doing something unexpected, even if it was going down 3 steps, coming back 2. Why didn't you just go down the step? No.
For him to treat those lyrics in that vocal performance and that acting performance with such care and specificity, it was almost like the way a wise person would speak to you on top of a mountaintop. It's not always what you expect, but you leave feeling a lot more enlightened than you did when you got there.
We are the music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams.
And that was Gene's great gift.
The guy that built that set, Harper Goff, was a brilliant designer. He had built the most beautiful office for Mr. Wonka for the end of the film. Charlie's going to say goodbye. I said, no, Wonka's berserk. I said, I want you to cut every piece of furniture in half. I want the desks in half. I want the vault in half. I want the piece of paper he reads in half. You've got to keep the madness up to the last minute.
Mr. Wonka?
I am extraordinarily busy, sir.
I just wanted to ask about the chocolate.
It was unrehearsed. Gene knew what he was going to do, but we didn't know what he was going to do.
The lifetime supply of chocolate for Charlie. When does he get it?
He doesn't.
Why not?
Because he broke the rules.
What rules? We didn't see any rules, did we, Charlie?
And they didn't know what I was going to do. But I really let him have it.
Wrong, sir. Wrong.
I knew that he was going to get a little upset with us, but I didn't know he was going to get that upset with us.
It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal. You stole fizzy lifting drinks. You bumped into the ceiling, which now has to be washed and sterilized, so you get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
He wasn't going to tell you what he was going to do. And so your expression, your reaction was a genuine reaction.
Charlie. My boy.
In retrospect, Gene made it quite easy for me. That's what good actors do. They help their partners on stage.
This is a very contemplative artist. The stars aligned, because that kind of artistry is super rare.
One of the best reviews of Willy Wonka comes from probably the greatest film critic of his generation, Roger Ebert, who says that Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is probably the best film of its sort since The Wizard of Oz. It is everything that family movies usually claim to be, but aren't. Delightful, funny, scary, exciting, and most of all, a genuine work of imagination.
I was asked to do publicity in Chicago for the release of Willy Wonka. The next day, I got a call from Woody Allen. I want to do a remake of Sister Carrie, he said.
I love you so much.
But instead of a woman in Jennifer Jones' part, I want to use a sheep. I knew before reading the script why he wanted me. An actor who could believably fall in love with a sheep and play it straight. When I left for Los Angeles to do Woody's film, I found out that Willy Wonka had failed at the box office. I was told that many mothers thought the lessons in the movie were too cruel for children to understand. I was leaving for California to do Woody's film in hopes of resurrecting my career. During all of the filming of Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex, Woody said, if you don't like any of these lines, just change them to what you'd like to say.
Hello, Daisy.
It seemed an extraordinary thing to say. Woody's great confidence was not that he knew he'd chosen the right actor, but that the event he'd written was more important than the particular words the actor used to bring that event to life.
Mr. Milos, I'd like to see the two of you again, but right now, you know, my office is jammed full.
Oh, I knew you could help. I knew. Thank you, Doctor.
As a matter of fact, if I could see Daisy alone, maybe, you know,
Anything. Anything.
You know, Gene was able to do things in comedy that are dangerous to do because he went often for such an extreme characterization or such an extreme situation, digging down into yourself to find this absurd reality.
Darling, I know this must all seem very strange to you. You from the hills of Armenia and me from Jackson Heights, and yet I think it could work if we gave it a chance.
You could have substituted the most glamorous female movie star for the sheep the way Gene treated the sheep.
I don't think I've ever known such peace and happiness in my life.
There's this ability to be simple and honest.
Is it my imagination, or do you always smell from lamb chops?
In a situation which is extraordinary and absurd.
Defendant did commit an adulterous act with a sheep.
It's most distasteful in view of the fact that the sheep was under 18 years old.
The memory of everything you always wanted to know about sex was so happy that it was making me sad, wondering if I would ever be asked to work in something wonderful again. In California, Mel Brooks was doing pre-production on a film called Black Bart. The title was later changed to Blazing Saddles.
It was a Western poking fun at Westerns.
Is anybody got a dime?
My biggest problem was finding the Waco Kid. The Waco Kid is the sidekick to the black sheriff, an alcoholic and struggling to stay alive in the world. Then I saw a movie with Gig Young. They shoot horses, don't they?
I sure as hell can spot a loser.
A wonderful actor. And I found out that in real life, he was a bit of an alcoholic. His agent said, no, he's been on the wagon for 2 years, not to worry. But life has taught me not to worry means worry. Anyway, start shooting. We're in the jail. The Waco Kid is upside down.
Are we awake?
There's Cleavon Little upside down from the Waco Kid's POV point of view. And Gig Young, he's struggling. Are we blah? Are we blah? He never finished the word black and ended it with a geyser of green vomit that shot across the jail cell and got the crew and everybody drenched. So he called for an ambulance and got him to the hospital in Burbank. The doctor who was treating him said, he's suffering from the DTs, or what's that, delirium tremens. It's a thing alcoholics get, so he hadn't stopped drinking. I said, well, can he work? He said, yeah, in about 3 or 4 months. This is Friday. I've got to shoot Monday. There. It came to me right then and there, Gene Wilder. He'll save me. He saved me on the producers. He will save me. And I called him and I said, and I was crying. I said, Gene, I need you. Come here. Come, save me.
He called me from the phone on stage. He said, can you come tomorrow? I said, I'm supposed to go to London to do The Little Prince with Stanley Donen directing. Beg off. The next day I was on a plane, and the next day I was hanging upside down in the jail cell.
Are we awake?
We're not sure. Are we black?
You know, it's just so great, his reading. And I said, that's the Waco Kid.
Send a wire to the main office and tell them that I said, ow!
Send wire, main office, tell them I said, ow. Gotcha.
I was one of the bad guys, but I was the funniest one of the bad guys, too. And I played him all through the thing, maybe not quite all there up here. We come riding up in the picture and meet the Waco Kid and the sheriff. And Mr. Taggart says, we're gonna shoot you guys.
All right, boys. On a count of 3. I wouldn't do that if I were you.
We have our guns drawn, and we're gonna shoot all the good guys. Gene, being the quick draw that he was, he's kind of like, I got something here that you don't know I've got. He puts his guns back, and you can see the smoke coming out of his holsters there. So I'll remember Gene, not just by his acting ability, which was wonderful, but because he was so good to me and so supportive.
Even though it was a wild comedy, in Blazing Saddles, racial prejudice is the engine that really drives the film and helps to make it work.
Good morning, ma'am.
Cleavon Little, he sees a little old lady
Lovely morning.
trying to make friends with the citizens of Rockridge, and she says, "Up yours, N-word." The sheriff shakes his head, and we could see tears. And Gene read these lines so beautifully.
What did you expect? Welcome, Sonny. Make yourself at home. Marry my daughter. You've got to remember that these are just simple farmers. These are people of the land. The common clay of the New West. You know. Morons.
And that was one of the funniest, laughs in the whole picture. And nobody in the world could have handled it half as well as Gene Wilder.
And you can tell from the scene and listening to him, he's speaking from the heart.
There is this authenticity to the Waco Kid that I don't think someone like John Wayne or Gig Young would have brought, because instantly it would have registered, oh, this is a veteran Western character actor doing a parody of a Western character actor. Gene Wilder played the Waco Kid as crazy and nutty, but entirely believable.
Where are you headed, cowboy?
Nowhere special.
Nowhere special. I always wanted to go there.
What can I tell you? He did a magnificent job all through the picture.
I think 1974 is probably the perfect year for Blazing Saddles, blaxploitation films at their height. Having a smart and thoughtful Western parody that really takes a hard look at America's racism, that is genius.
I met Gene one day when I was buying clothes in Beverly Hills. I introduced myself. I said, Gene, I'm Mike Medavoy. I'm an agent, and I'd like to represent you. And I said, the truth is, I look at your career, you ought to be writing and probably directing, too.
Because of that accidental bump on the street corner, Mike Medavoy became my California agent.
And I signed Gene.
I rented a small house on the bay in West Hampton Beach, New York. After lunch one afternoon, I walked up to my bedroom with a yellow legal pad and a blue felt pen. At the top of the page, I wrote, Young Frankenstein. The birth of a monster. And then wrote 2 pages of what might happen to me if I were the great-grandson of Beaufort von Frankenstein and was called to Transylvania because I had just inherited the Frankenstein estate. That night, I watched a summer replacement television show called The Marty Feldman Comedy Machine.
Would you walk this way?
After seeing it, I said, who is that funny man on television? A week later, I received a call from my California agent, Mike Medavoy.
I was sitting in my office, and Marty Feldman and his wife were there to try to get me to represent him. And then Peter Boyle walked into the office, and so I introduced all of them. And I decided, you know what? I have a feeling that this would be a really good group to put together with Gene. So I called Gene up on the phone. And I said, Gene, do you have anything that you can do with Marty Feldman and Peter Boyle?
I said, how did you happen to come up with that? He said, because I represent you and Marty and Peter. And,
As it happens, I think I do have something. I want to work on it for another day. I'll send it to you. That night, inspired by having just seen Marty Feldman on television, I wrote a scene that takes place at Transylvania Station, where Igor and Frederick meet for the first time, almost verbatim the way it was later filmed.
Dr. Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
You're putting me on.
I called Mel Brooks and told him my little Frankenstein scenario. Cute, he said. That's cute.
What's your dream for this? He said, I want you to write it with me and direct it and not be in it. And I said, okay, I'll do it.
The next morning, I would start writing. Mel would come over after dinner each evening and look at the pages.
When we thought we had a good script, we met Mike Gruskoff, a wonderful guy and a wonderful producer. And he said, I've had a discussion already with Columbia Pictures. Yeah.
Gene, Mel, and I, we had a meeting at Columbia. I said, we really like the script. We thought we had something good, you know? We definitely thought we had something good.
We shook hands. We're ready to make a Young Frankenstein for Columbia Pictures. As we leave the meeting, I get to the door. Before I shut it, I say, oh, by the way, in the James Whale 1931 Universal tradition, we are making it in black and white. Closed the door, left. A thundering herd of Jewish executives run after us down the hall saying, no, it's a deal breaker. And as one, Gruskoff and Gene and Mel shouted back, then break it.
Nobody wanted to do a black and white movie. Mike Gruskoff actually was very friendly with Alan Ladd and took it to Fox.
Alan Ladd Jr. is one of my close friends. He had come to Fox. 3 days later, we had a deal.
If you're going to make a parody tribute film of James Whale's Frankenstein, you're going to have to do that in black and white if you're going to do it right. Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder understood that. Columbia executives, to their eternal regret, did not.
Making Young Frankenstein was the happiest I'd ever been on a film. Madeline Kahn, Peter Boyle, Marty Feldman, Terry Garr, Cloris Leachman, Kenny Mars, and Mel directing. It was like taking a small breath of heaven each day.
Creatively, I let them do their thing. Gene and Mel take it to the next step. They go beyond. They have balls. That's what they have.
What knockers?
Oh, thank you, Doctor.
Mel and Gene, they're not afraid to go big. They're not afraid of failure. They'll take a chance.
The only thing that concerns me is the preservation of life.
I never had to give Gene any direction. And I didn't have to, really, because he was such a good actor.
We shall ascend into the heavens. We shall mock the earthquake.
We had a code, blue and orange. When I said Gene, blue meant bring it up. Give me more intensity, more excitement. When I said orange, I want you to play over the top. I said, Gene, I need orange here at the end of this. Got it.
Life, do you hear me? Give my creation life!
He could hit a high note easily as high as Maria Callas. He could go there. He was amazing.
I have favorite moments of him, as I do of most actors. I admire so much the big moments when he still was believable.
It's alive!
And then there was a quiet moment in Young Frankenstein when it was just as ludicrous, but it was quiet and sincere. He was questioning Igor like a little boy.
Would you mind telling me whose brain I did put in?
And you won't be angry?
I will not be angry.
Abby someone.
Abby someone. Abby who?
Abby Normal.
Abby Normal.
I'm almost sure that was the name.
Are you saying that I put an abnormal brain into a 7.5-foot long, 54-inch wide gorilla?
He was so real about it that it was just as absurd as the big showy moment, but even more hilarious because he meant it. He really meant it.
We shall be friends.
It was Gene Wilder's idea. He says, well, maybe I can get Gene Hackman to play the blind guy because they were pals. And he got Hackman, who was so great.
Are you ready for your soup?
Oh, my friend, you don't know how long I've waited for the pleasure of another human being. And sometimes in our preoccupation with worldly matters.
And he was funny. He was very funny, you know.
We never improvised dialogue on the set.
Would you like to have a roll in the hay?
Physical actions, yes, but not dialogue.
Marker.
We were filming the scene of Madeline Kahn's arrival at the Frankenstein castle.
Action.
She was wearing a fox stole and a big turban on her head. And then Marty, in one of his impulsive inspirations, took a huge bite out of the tail of the fox fur that Madeline was wearing around her neck. But the tail came off in his mouth.
Stop that!
And we couldn't not laugh.
May I go in?
We all laughed, and Marty was so funny doing it.
Out of such lunacy, great comedy is born.
We had to stop a lot of times to,
That music,
because everybody was laughing.
that quaint.
We had to take breaks.
Follow me, please.
It cost me over $200. I bought handkerchiefs. About 150 handkerchiefs for the crew and everybody.
Now listen to me very carefully. Don't put the candle back.
I said, when you feel a laugh coming on, shove that handkerchief in your mouth. Stifle your laugh. I think it may have been the butt hump.
You know, I don't mean to embarrass you, but I'm a rather brilliant surgeon. Perhaps I could help you with that hump.
What hump?
I turned to look at the crew and I saw a sea of white handkerchiefs. I said, I think we got a head there.
In all the time we spent together, Mel and I had only one argument. It was when I showed him a scene I had written in which Dr. Frankenstein and the monster sing and dance to Puttin' on the Ritz.
I said, there's no putting on the Ritz. We are not going to do that because we have been very faithful to James Whale and to the horror films of the 30s. This makes it silly. I said, no, we're not doing it. That's the end of it.
I was close to rage and tears.
I argued logic from Dr. Frankenstein's point of view, his need to win over this stuffy audience of scientists and their wives that the monster could be taught to do anything.
And right in mid-sentence, Mel says, okay, it's in. I wanted to see how hard you'd fight for it. And I knew if you fought hard enough, it was right.
We start shooting, and Gene put everything he had into it to prove it.
Come, let's mix where Rockefellers walk with sticks.
And Peter Boyle was never better. After that was over, I said, Gene, accept my apology. It's the best thing in the movie. It's the reason we made it.
When you think about great cinematic collaborations, I mean, whether you're talking about Tracy and Eppert or William Powell and Myrna Loy or Steven Spielberg and John Williams, Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder belong in that class. I think they fed off each other, and that pushed them to the heights they both achieved.
On the last day of filming, during our lunch hour, I was sitting in the Frankenstein bedroom set, staring at the fake fireplace. Mel wandered in and saw me. "What's the matter? Why so sad?" he asked. "I don't want to leave Transylvania." When we were in the thick of editing Young Frankenstein, Mel turned to me and said, "If you keep writing, you're going to want to direct just so someone doesn't screw up what you've written." 2 weeks later, fate just struck again. Alan Ladd Jr. asked me if I wanted to direct Sherlock Holmes' Smarter Brother, my idea for a romantic comedy about a brother of Sherlock Holmes.
Gene said, "There's something I want to write and direct." And Gene Wilder went on to have a very nice career as a writer-director.
I had a comedy scene at the beginning of filming Sherlock that was one of my favorites. I'm waiting to see Lord Redcliffe in his study. There's a tempting box of chocolates sitting open on his desk and melting in the sun. So I decide to steal just one tiny piece. The crew was holding back laughter, but all I was trying to do as an actor was to act as normally as I possibly could. It was the same lesson I'd learned from Charlie Chaplin when I saw The Circus. If the physical thing you're doing is funny, you don't have to act funny while doing it. Just be real, and it will be funnier. The acting lesson from this film seems so simple, yet it inspired me for the rest of my career.
When I was 23, I was miraculously nominated for Best Actress for a movie called Hester Street. The phone didn't ring for a solid year after that. And the first call I got about work was Gene calling about The World's Greatest Lover. I had never in my life done a comedy. Why would Gene Wilder be calling for me to be in a comedy?
You get some insight into Gene that he casts Carol Kane. This was not a comedy actress. He had this instinct. You guys, he knew people. I mean, Carol Kane comes off this Oscar nomination for a dramatic role, and he thinks, no, funny. She's funny. And now we know there's 40 plus years of evidence that Carol Kane is funny. But, Gene recognized it.
It was about a baker from Milwaukee in 1927 who wants to try out for a big Hollywood contest to find the next Rudolph Valentino. He takes his wife to Hollywood.
I will win that screen test! Not because I'm the best actor in the world, not because I'm the sexiest man in the world, not because I'm the most handsome man in the world, but because I am unique!
You ought to be in pictures. You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.
For someone just beginning as a director, writer, producer, star, Gene was very calm and confident and happy.
When you write, direct, and act in a movie, there are 3 ways they can kill you. And if they want to kill you, they go for all 3. Gene was able to exert his own artistic vision.
The World's Greatest Lover is a big love letter to movies, Hollywood, all his idols, Chaplin, Busby Berkeley, Laurel and Hardy, and these classic comedy bits. The way Gene shot the movie extreme close-ups frequently of the eyes to let the eyes do the talking as they did in the silent movie era.
He manages to convey hurt and longing and fear and anger in those eyes without speaking a line. Gene Wilder would have been a great silent actor. No surprise that he chose to make a film that salutes silent Hollywood.
The lighting and the costumes and the makeup is so evocative of that time. That obviously appealed to Gene a lot. I love Gene's choice of acting roles. It's totally eclectic. He did what he wanted to do, what spoke to him, what he loved. He just did it.
It was called The Frisco Kid.
Der Schmendrick fuhrt kan Amerika.
A film about a Polish rabbi
America.
who comes to America at the time of the gold rush and becomes best friends with a bank robber and is captured by Indians.
Yes or no? Can your God make rain?
She doesn't make rain.
The rabbi and the chief form a friendship discussing the Jewish God.
Sing around blindly like little mice in the darkness, but it does not make rain. Of course, sometimes just like that, he'll change his mind.
The Frisco Kid came closer to what I am in life than anything else.
We were never a particularly religious family when I was growing up, in the sense of prayers at home or rituals, other than going to my grandparents for a meal on Passover and going to the synagogue on the high holidays.
Gene's grandfather was president of his old synagogue, which was an old, little small Orthodox synagogue in the old Jewish neighborhood. We had strong feelings about Judaism. I would say Gene was spiritual.
There's my mother in me, and there's my father in me.
There was a certain innocence about the way I acted on screen. I must have inherited it from my father. My father was born in Russia, but came to Milwaukee with his family when he was 11. He wasn't dumb, but he was very innocent.
Landsman! Landsman! Danken Gott! Danken Gott, als du gefunden. Finsteren Sache hat mich gefahren. Ich hab gegangen erwarten zu San Francisco. Und verkackte Menschen haben mich geschlagen.
Does thou speak English?
Dost thou speak Ing? Oi, Gewalt!
The wonderful Robert Aldrich was directing, and Mace Neufeld was the producer, but we still had to find a co-star.
When we started to do the film, we were going to use John Wayne. And he was all excited about doing the project.
I was so happy, and one of the executives got the bright idea of going out to Long Beach, California, where John Wayne lived, and tried to knock him down $250,000. And he said, forget the whole thing.
He was out.
I was asked to look at the work of an up-and-coming young actor by the name of Harrison Ford. I thought Harrison was charming and might possibly get somewhere in the business.
What do you call this in Jewish?
Tuchus.
Or you keep your eyes on this tuchus and don't take them off till I tell you.
Harrison was super popular, and everybody was crazy about him, but Gene was different. Gene Wilder was one of my heroes. He was smart, he was funny, he was kind. He made me feel very special. I was 14 years old, and my father said that I was okay to actually be in the movie. So they made me up, probably inappropriately, and I was the Jewish Indian. I remember feeling very excited but very nervous to be on the set.
Everybody dance.
So he is teaching the Indians Jewish dancing.
That's good with the hands. Watch that lady. I think that lady's a Jewish Indian. Yep.
Gene had taken peyote, but he doesn't know that.
Now we do a jump, a little bitty jump.
He is feeling the effects of the drugs.
1, 2, 3.
And he passes out. And I look at him and I go, so that's my big role in the movie.
Now we had Harrison Ford and Gene Wilder. And Gene Wilder carried the comedy in the movie.
Don't wake me in the morning.
I'll try to be as quiet as possible.
One example of Gene's connection to Judaism is that Gene and Harrison Ford are trying to get away from the bad guys.
What the hell are you doing?
I don't ride today.
And it's the Sabbath. You can't ride on the Sabbath. Gene says we have to wait for the sun to set.
Not yet. Now!
And as soon as the sun set,
now!
Off they go.
God, longest damn day of my life.
I'll never be as good in drama as I am in comedy.
Oi!
When I'm acting, I want to be really funny and part vulnerable.
Wait, we are doing this to keep warm, aren't we?
Uh-huh.
In that case, you can put your arms around me.
That's what I like the best.
I'm not a good actor. I'm a good reactor. Something happens. That's why Richard and I are so good together.
Richard Pryor and I met in Calgary, Canada, as we were both checking in at the hotel. The next morning, we did our first short scene in the film Silver Streak. There were police cars and helicopters and guns all around us.
Ah! Shit! Take it easy, killer. What are you doing here?
When Richard and I did our first scene, some magic happened, what they call chemistry. I would answer him back and forth, and we were on such a similar wavelength. No thinking, just spontaneous reaction.
Who's in charge here? Would you get down?
That was the start of our improvisatory relationship on film.
My dad couldn't read very well. He was dyslexic a little bit. And so a lot of his education came from the feel of something.
Richard's way always has an emotional rather than intellectual base. In this regard, Richard was my teacher.
What are you doing?
I'm getting bad. You better get bad, Jack, because you ain't bad. You're gonna get fucked. You bad, they don't mess with you.
Words kept coming out of my mouth in response to things that Richard was saying. Things that weren't in the script.
You're a little too bad, ain't you?
My dad knew undeniably there was a magic between them.
That's right, we bad. That's right.
Together, it was like explosive on the screen.
I don't know what makes a great comedy duo. They both have to be funny, but they have to work off each other. Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor, they fueled each other, and their improvs made them both better.
The director, Sidney Poitier, wanted the script rewritten to accommodate the particular talents of his two stars. Then he said, "I want you both to fly."
Oh, please! He's sick! He's having a fit! See, he don't have his fit pills! He's got them!
And we did fly.
Harry! Harry, for God's sake! Ah! You're gonna get us in trouble!
They're wild together. Your crew is laughing. They weren't afraid to be silly, and it comes out genius.
All right, you two, and up and at 'em! I can't
Richard and I were certainly silly together, at least on film. But as close as we were on film, it didn't carry over to our private lives.
When the camera was off, that was it. And that's kind of how they were, and I understand that. I mean, they were two polar opposites.
Gee, when you were doing those movies with Richard Pryor, did his drug usage ever get in the way of the film?
I got to know Richards, and I got to love him. And he was going through a difficult period. But I never talked to him about that.
Whatever it was that he was going through, he quieted with his drugs and alcohols and women. It was almost like self-sabotaging, you know, to not show up on time to set. But when they came together, a black and white duo team, creating this laughter together, that to me is what comedy is about. You can't deny that's magic.
My next movie project was a comedy mystery called Hanky Panky, with Sidney Poitier directing. Lots of female stars said they would do the movie, but Sidney cast Gilda Radner. The day Gilda and I met, I was in my makeup and dressed in a tuxedo when I walked up to her to say hello.
Stay here, I'll be right back. Well, your co-star in this is Gilda Radner. Isn't she wonderful? Why are you smiling?
Because you want to know what I think of her, it'll be more than wonderful, yes.
When Gilda went to do the movie Hanky Panky, she was having difficulty in the marriage that she was in. So when she told me that she's becoming very friendly with Gene Wilder, very friendly, I'm going, all right. That was a euphemism for, I'm going to end up with Gene Wilder.
He had a mesmerizing stare. And those eyes, those blue. I mean, I could see why Gilda fell in love with him.
Gilda was like 14-ish when her dad died. Gene was one-stop shopping. He was older. So there was the dad thing. He already had his own career. And she was grateful for it.
Gilda was the most generous and compassionate and original person I had ever met. It was wonderful to be with Gilda most of the time. She was so strong-willed and yet so fragile.
When Gilda met Gene, she had a world of problems. She drank too much. She was a bulimic. Gene sent her to a battery of doctors to redo her, to fix her, and rehabilitates her to a degree.
We were living in Los Angeles, having just finished filming The Woman in Red. Seeing Gilda looking strong and healthy and so happy, I thought maybe things between us can work.
If I found a restaurant that was interesting, I'd always call him and say, let's go here. And he'd take Gilda, who loved my wife, Ann, and Ann loved Gilda, so it was perfect. We were best friends. It was wonderful.
Gilda was different. She said, I'm not a perfect woman that you've been searching for all your life. I'm just little imperfect Gilda. And if that's what you want, a real love, I'm your best bet.
We were married on September 18th, 1984. She was 38 years old. Now she wanted a baby. Desperately, of course.
Just when it stops before you go away again.
Meanwhile, I was making a new movie, Haunted Honeymoon.
It's always much easier to kiss someone in a movie that you kiss all the time, because it's familiar territory.
Gilda found out that she was pregnant and was thrilled beyond belief. She went in for an exam and found out it was ectopic pregnancy, and it was devastating. Everything was devastating. A couple months after the surgery, that's when they realized that she had ovarian cancer.
Gilda grabbed my face in her hands and sobbed. No more bad news. No more bad news. I don't want any more bad news.
There's something mythological about somebody going through all of this, finding the love of their lives, and then God saying, ha, you're not going to enjoy this.
She was on such a beautiful path, a beautiful life. Everything that she ever dreamt of was happening, and then this was like a bomb that fell in her lap.
Between her chemotherapy treatments, Gilda would come home and try to lead as normal a life as possible, but the first few days were always exhausting because she was so hyped up from steroids.
I remember we were out once. I said, how you doing? And she said, I'm doing the best I can, but poor Gene, you have no idea what I'm putting that guy through. It's unfortunate he had to be put to that test, but he was terrific. She made herself very public when she was sick. She was on the cover of Life magazine. She did 1,000 interviews. She went on Letterman. And on a show I co-created called It's Gary Shandling Show, Gene was very supportive of her coming on.
When she got cancer, I never thought that she would die from it. I thought she'd lick it. I was stupid because everyone else seemed to know, but I didn't. She was 43 years old when she died. I buried her in front of a tall white ash tree, 3 miles from her home in Connecticut. I used to worry all my early life about being good enough to please God. Gilda didn't think about those things. She was just naturally good. I don't want to be a better person than Gilda. She was just human, and that's all I want to be, just human. In our bedroom in Connecticut, for the sake of my psychological health, I was rewriting a comedy for me and Richard Pryor. It sounds oxymoronic, but absurdity was a familiar guest now. I had done research at the Braille Institute in Los Angeles, which gave me confidence in writing Richard's part. I needed to know about people who were profoundly deaf, which was the case with the character I was to play. So I went to see this lady at the New York League for the Hard of Hearing. They told me her name was Ms. Webb. I said, oh my God, my luck. Some New England old biddy is going to say, you're making fun of the blind and the deaf.
So I just thought, I'll meet him just like a regular person. And he wasn't a regular person. He was gorgeous. I was very interested in getting his character right.
Watch me say back.
Came to class and he saw how people learn how to lip read. And he'd ask them a question like, does everybody say, what are you, fucking deaf? And they say, all the time. And that line is in the movie.
What are you, fucking deaf? Move!
And then I would take little plugs and put them in my ears so I could walk through the streets of New York, and it cut out about 65% of sound.
You dumb idiot!
You're a dumb idiot.
You talking to me?
See No Evil, Hear No Evil was a big deal for Daddy because it was 2.5 years into his multiple sclerosis diagnosis. He needed something for him to show he could still do what he does. Dad was definitely very authentic because he was going through all those things. He was having trouble. He was that blind man.
I'm blind.
Who lost his eyesight.
You're blind.
Yes, I'm blind. How can I have the job?
So everything was authentic for him in that moment.
And we were very conscious of the fact that we were doing
a film about people with disability. We worked very diligently at not offending people.
I had no idea. I'm sorry.
Now you know. Can I get the job?
You're really blind?
Yes, I'm really blind, man. What are you, fucking deaf?
Yes, I'm fucking deaf.
They both were so vulnerable, and I think they both wore their hearts on their sleeve. And that's what we see coming across, you know, on the camera is this real love. I got to be on set and watch the process of them work together and the kindness that I saw Gene display towards my dad, who was struggling sometimes physically.
Steps coming up, Paulie. 3 steps and
I witnessed my dad having trouble walking, holding on and remembering lines because of the MS. And I loved that in the non-obvious way, Gene was there for him to be able to be unsteady, but not come off unsteady to us.
And
that's teamwork.
Go!
Of all the pleasurable times that Richard and I had on previous films, and there were some wonderful times, despite the difficulties, the experience on See No Evil, Hear No Evil was the happiest. Richard was sane and clear-headed and filled with good humor.
I have a lot of love for you.
Thank you.
People looked forward to these buddy films. The formula wasn't just in the writing. The formula was the two people. Here they were from different sides of racial lines, being able to come together and make us laugh. And that's an amazing legacy.
In September of 1989, I got a call from the New York League for the Hard of Hearing saying that Ms. Webb wanted to speak to me.
I called him and said that I had grant money
Welcome
to make a videotape for people to learn to speech read so that we could put them in libraries. And he said, I'd help you with that.
We arranged to meet at my favorite Italian restaurant in Manhattan. She set a tape recorder between us, and while we ate, Karen posed common problems for the hearing impaired. The second time we met, at the same restaurant, we worked on improving the actual language that the characters in each sketch would use. The third week, I said, leave the tape recorder at home. We had our first actual date on a beautiful fall evening in the same restaurant at the same corner table.
He was unique in that he truly listened. He was just a different kind of person than I'd ever met.
I'd hold Karen's hand. To have found someone at this stage of my life. I was in love. Now I'll go back to watercolor painting and maybe to acting if I get another job, and I'm going to get married.
Is this an announcement? Can we, I mean, is this the first time you've mentioned it?
Yes. Yeah, I was wondering whether to ask her, and
you just
looking at you, I decided I'm going to ask that girl to marry me. On September 8th, 1991, Karen and I were married in the backyard of the home in Connecticut that Gilda had left me. Fate brought us together at this exact point in both of our lives. If I hadn't been in See No Evil, Hear No Evil, I would never have met Ms. Webb, and now I'm married to her.
Gene was wonderful. He was the best husband I think anybody could ask for. To love and be loved is the best gift in the world, and we had that. We did watercolors together, and we played tennis together, and we walked together. We played golf together. He was the world's greatest lover, and he was my Frisco kid. He truly cared about me, loved my family and my grandchildren, and everybody felt that love.
We took tap dancing lessons once a week. Karen found a wonderful teacher, and here's the amazing thing. It felt as exciting as it did when we had our first actual date, when she was still a stranger to me. With Karen, I do believe in fate.
You've been through so much. You've had incredible career success. You've had tragedy in your life. You seem like you're in a really good place now. You're happy. And that made me feel really, that made me feel good because I want you to be happy. So that was nice. That's true, right? You feel good.
I'm happier than I've ever been in my life.
That's fantastic. Well,
When he had television interviews, I went with him. I went with him everywhere. I went to the movie set, and I would watch him act.
I'm sorry, Mr. Truman. Does my pounding disturb you?
No, sir. Just caught me by surprise.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll try to be more considerate in the future.
We were blessed with Gene coming on Will and Grace. We were just floored. I like to think that he recognized something in the show that harkened back to all the things he brought. He was so kind and gentle, and I just wanted to make him laugh.
Say Einstein.
Einstein.
Louder, Einstein!
Louder, Einstein!
I surprised him with something in a take that I'm very proud of.
Your name is Frankenstein!
It was just so lovely. It's one of my favorite memories. There was a gentleness to the show, and there was a sensitivity to the show, and there was an insane wackiness to the show.
Occupied.
And he got to do all of those things.
Here!
It was almost like a victory lap.
I don't want to have to prove that I'm a good actor anymore. I started writing a novel. Right now, I would rather write fiction than act.
Gene was an extremely talented person in many areas. He was a very, very good painter, mainly watercolors. And he studied hard. He took lessons. He kept trying to get better and better.
Will you just shut your mouth? I'm having a heart attack.
I got to do some plays with Gene at the Westport Playhouse. And that was fun to be on stage with him. Both Gene and I come from a background of theater. And he was a very creative guy and a big appreciator of other people's creativity.
The first signs something was wrong were when I noticed Gene would forget things that were really always easy for him to remember.
But when we did the one in jail...
Stir crazy.
Yeah, it was stir crazy, wasn't it?
He didn't remember the name of the movie, Young Frankenstein. He would have never, ever forgot that because that was his favorite movie. He then started to forget many things, and I asked him if he'd noticed and if he'd go for an evaluation, and he said, if it gets worse. A lot of people have mild cognitive impairment and it doesn't progress, and I suppose I hoped that was what it was. I found a doctor who did the comprehensive test for cognitive impairment in Connecticut. Gene was amazed that he couldn't draw a clock and make it 10:30. And he couldn't do it. He wasn't upset, he just couldn't figure out why. But I knew then that something was very wrong. Our friend suggested we go see Dr. Michael Raffi in San Diego, where we've spent the winters.
I first met Gene in January of 2014, where he was 80 years old. Based on the history examination, memory testing, MRI of the brain, as well as a very specialized kind of scan called an amyloid PET scan, was confirmatory for his diagnosis. Alzheimer's disease dementia.
I said, oh no. And Gene said, oh no. He never really accepted that he had Alzheimer's. And maybe by the time we found out that's what it was, his hippocampus didn't let him remember. So I'm not sure that he ever knew. When I'd see him slip away further from me, I was sick to my stomach. But I had to keep smiling and tell him that everything was okay. That was the hardest part for me.
Gene certainly had memory loss that progressively worsened over time, and also included some other thinking skills that were affected, including language.
I called him a lot thinking. Maybe if I gave him enough references, I could get him out of it. Insanity in my part. He was in the throes of that terrible disease. We could never talk too long after he got it. It was so sad, it made me cry a lot, you know.
We still went out to dinner, and he made it to his nephew's wedding. He could hardly walk. He danced down the aisle and made it through the wedding.
He was always in our prayers, and it's a sad thing to see somebody that you love so much, suffer like that. To Karen and anybody, who was involved with him intimately, it's hard to see that.
People think Alzheimer's is only a memory disease, but what attacks your brain attacks your body. Couldn't put on his shoes, couldn't tie his tie. One time he fell, and there were 3 of us, and we couldn't get him up on the bed. And finally we ended up laughing. We have pictures of all of us laughing. Took us a couple of hours. He was dying, and Gene looked at me and says, "Is that what's happening?" Yeah, I said yes. He hadn't walked alone, and it was just a few days before he died. And I looked up, and he was walking across the kitchen. and then he said, "I want to go swimming." He dove into the pool like he used to. I saw his little tush in the air, and I was awestruck. And he took 2 strokes. He stood up, shook his head the way he always did to get the water out of his ear, and said, "That's good." Went back to bed, and I think he just wanted to get in the pool one more time. We always had music playing in the house. We used to listen to Ella Fitzgerald. The music was playing in the background. Somewhere over the rainbow. Ella Fitzgerald was singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I was lying next to him, and he sat up in bed and he said, "I trust you." And he said, "I love you." That's the last thing he said.
There was some really sad news about the passing of Gene Wilder. Learning more about the death of Gene Wilder.
One of the most legendary comedic talents of our time
has died due to complications from Alzheimer's disease.
The reactions pouring in from coast to coast.
I was inconsolable for a couple of weeks. When he lived his life, he lived it loud and eloquently. He was an outstanding actor and also an outstanding person.
You are my best friend.
I believe Leo Bloom exists. I believe the Waco Kid exists. I believe Dr. Frankenstein exists. That's insane. Gene makes you think that guy is out there trying his hardest despite all these obstacles. to navigate this impossible world. He embodied these characters, and we felt their humanity.